Nice to see you.
Okay, it looks like the waiting room has emptied out into our main room. So welcome everybody to the finale of the 2021 Virtual Summer Poetry Festival from Longfellow House and the Friends of Longfellow House, Washington's headquarters, and our wonderful partners at the New England Poetry Club and the National Park Service who have put this together. We have had a wonderful summer of readings of the poetry of activism, and today we will celebrate the Golden Rose Award ceremony, one of the New England Poetry Club's venerable traditions. And now I'm going to turn over the microphone to Emily Levine, Supervisory Park Ranger at Longfellow House, Washington's headquarters National Historic Site. Emily.
Thank you, John. And thank you to all of you once again for being here. This is such a wonderful way to be wrapping up this summer's 2021 Virtual Poetry Festival. Just a couple of housekeeping reminders from me. We are recording this afternoon's event. So if you do choose to keep your camera on, you may appear in that recording. Once the recording is available, I will go ahead and put that up on our YouTube page, and I'll make that link available to folks who signed up for today's event so that you can relive the wonderful reading that we're about to hear. I'd also like to point out that this afternoon's event is being captioned, so live captions are available. I just put the link into the chat. I'm putting it in there once again. So if you click over there, you'll be able to see captions for this afternoon. Last sort of point of business, after the reading, we will have some time for a question and answer session with Rhina. And so think about those questions that you'd like to ask. Once the reading is finished, I'll come back and invite folks to put those questions into the chat, or if you're feeling brave, to come off mute and just have a little bit of conversation. So we're looking forward to that. All right, without further ado, let me turn it over to Jean-Denis to introduce our award winner.
Good afternoon. Good evening, everyone. Bienvenidos. It is such an honor. It is such an honor to introduce the year's annual Golden Rose Award to you. And this person is Rhina Espaillat. And to me, it's a double honor to have the opportunity to introduce her. On a personal note, I can say Rhina Espaillat embodies the art of poetry. Wherever she is, poetry flows. May it be translation, may it be in Haitian Creole, French, Spanish, English, or Armenian, she makes it work. So, Rhina, my only regret is that I met you too late. That should have happened 50 or 60 years ago, but that's okay. We'll take what we have.
But you weren't born yet.
Rhina Espaillat. We can catch up for time. Our winner today, the award winner, the Golden Rose Award winner today, has published 12 full-length books of poetry and 4 chapter books and a monograph on translation. Rhina is noted for her English translation of St. John of the Cross, as well as her book of Spanish translations of Robert Alcohai, and her bilingual collection Oscura Fruta, Dark Berries. Her work, which comprises poetry, essays, and short stories in both English and her native Spanish, and translations from and into both languages, appears in numerous journals, anthologies, and websites. She has received many additional and international awards. Rhina is a founding member of both the Fresh Meadows Poets in New York City and the Popper River poet in Massachusetts. She has been working for many years to bring poetry to a larger, more diverse public, and also advance the cause of cultural exchanges to multilingual readings and workshops on the process of translation. We can speak pages and pages to introduce Rhina, but we can't spoil the event. We can simply ask all of you here tonight to let's clap our hands together to welcome the awardee, our dear Rhina Espaillat. You can unlock yourself, unmute yourself, and welcome her loudly. Congratulations, Rhina.
Thank you so much, Yandanith. Oh, thank you, Jose Mundo. How lovely. Good to see you. It's wonderful to see old friends and to see new ones. I want to thank especially the people who have made this happen at Longfellow House, the New England Poetry Club people who have guided me through things that I could never have worked out by myself. So thank you very much, all of you. I cannot put into words how grateful I am for this award, how proud I am of this award, and how much bragging I'm going to do. Because it's not every girl from La Vega, my hometown, who ends up in an institution that has the oldest, most long-lasting reading series in the country. So I am very, very proud indeed, and I may never get my feet down on the earth again. I've given a title to my reading. My poetry reading is going to be called Encounters. Encounters, because one of the many, many things that I love about poetry is the fact that it brings about encounters between people, between forces, between organizations, between all sorts of things that are unexpected and surprising. For instance, poetry makes possible a kind of encounter that is sometimes dreamlike, or if you put it the other way, nightmarish. Sometimes it allows us to speak to parts of ourselves, things in our own being that are not often on speaking terms with us, but it breaks through the wall and it allows us to look in to parts of ourselves we hardly knew were there. It allows us to speak to one another as if we had known each other for years and years, when actually we may just have met as the reader and a member of the audience. There are many, many parts of the world that you cannot reach any other way. For example, time travel. You can time travel with poetry. You can move forward to the people who have not been born yet, and yet they're there for you. They're there in your imagination, and backward to people who disappeared millennia ago. So I'm going to begin with a very simple encounter. And this is a real story. This really happened. It's called Book Signing, so you know where I was. Book signing after a talk on the poem as experience redeemed by craft. How silly he must feel. How asinine, clutching the book of poems he's had me sign, inscribed to him. Aware, too late, I see it in his eyes. These samples are not free. Ridiculous, an unintended theft. This rapt, admiring listener has left in lieu of payment a half-guilty sense that poems should be their own recompense and sprout like gifts for nothing. So it goes, his sermon in my head, just as the rose opens unpaid. And yes, he understood those lines about my father's death. So good a listener should be more observant too, and let the facts hit home. If what we do barely draws blood, it fails to find its mark. The reader may be winged, but in the dark. Watching the target quiver surely must be payment enough, so says the heart, not purely truthful, eager to please as ever, undoing what's half done by seeming clever. No, I must find him. Tapped him on the shoulder and give the truth its due by being bolder, harder than heart would wish. Tell him the price and watch him fumble for it. That's not nice, but it's clear. Work is not roses. Craft is stern. Nothing well done comes cheap. Yes, let him learn. If he learns nothing else from me today, that poems are goods for which we both must pay. And certainly it's good to let the reader know that you didn't get the poem free either, that you had to have those experiences first that had to be redeemed by craft. That poetry is not a wildflower. It's a very difficult to grow flower. Okay, so now here is a different kind of encounter, and this is one that many of us have first thing in the morning and are sometimes shocked by it. This woman in the mirror. This woman is neither friend nor stranger, but witness, whose mute judgment is acid with truth. She inhabits my days as music lives in the blown flute, only from silence to silence. If I could unhusk away her changes down through the patient folds, myself would coil there. But I am not the self her look grieves for, seeking across the mirror to find her other. This woman needs rare goods to ransom back what we set out to be, but I am all she has. And sometimes we all have that feeling of what happened to the self that I was going to become, this magnificent XYZ, whatever, this astrophysics genius or something. Where did that person go? Well, I don't know. It's in hiding somewhere. So this woman needs rare goods to ransom back what we set out to be, but I am all she has. Oh, here's another kind of guess. Here's another kind of encounter. This one is with the dead. And any poet will tell you that we live among the dead almost half the time. And these are the dead who follow us wherever we go. Whether we know it or not, there they are. They pop up in the newly bought houses, in the apartments, in the new jobs, etc., etc. New house, old guests. Wakeful at night, sometimes in this strange place, I look for them, our hardy ghosts, who passed their dole of days with us and need to trace us back to where we wept for them at last. Now that a different landscape holds its breath around our changing bodies, do they stand past change in the clear garments of their death, locked out of empty rooms, perplexed and banned? No, they have found us here. I know their touch, that busy housewife, children out of time, my father reconciled to losing much, that bright young neighbor grieving his green prime, our jaunty singer, my old gifted friend, all wakeful too, all faithful to the end. And it's amazing what comfort they are or can be. Now, you know about that, don't you? And this is another kind of ghost. This is the kind that we don't necessarily see all the time, the people who don't follow us around wherever we go, but who turn up, or at least we hope they will turn up when we really need them badly. As for example, when you're going in under anesthesia because you're having a surgery that you're not quite sure you want. So you're a little bit, I don't know how to put it. I guess scared is the word. Going under. Listen, I tell my body. Lie down, meek as a hostage. Your members are estranged from you, rehearsing. The self you seek has no friends here, and every password's changed. But at sleep's border, just at the clearing where the watchfires of home gutter and flame and flicker dim on the far side of hearing, I meet an army cheering me by name. Gathered from every age, home to the dust I am, their blood's republic, meeting ground of seed and sower and harvest held in trust. They wait, they arm themselves without a sound. My father is here, striding in my bones, his dying forgotten, and the sons and daughters of the children of my sons, here in my pulse, steady and strong as horses. Here is another true story. Some of you who know New York, I want you to think for a minute of 68th Street, 69th Street, and Amsterdam Avenue. If you go back far enough, you may, just may, have a memory of PS 94, my elementary school. This is called Crayons, and it has a dedication for Miss Conroy, late of PS 94. I must have been about 8 at the time. When the child learning English joined your class, you gave her crayons, a whole box to keep, and said, now draw me something you remember. Windows were trimmed. It was early November with toothy pumpkins. What your student drew, though, was her narrative. Figures afloat on spikes of parrot green meant to be grass, waved out to one lone figure on a boat tilting precarious in a royal of blue meant to be sky and sea, both very deep. The next day, Miss Conroy, you unrolled, laid out, and tacked up on the bare back wall 8 yards of oak tag. From the far left end, each artist classmate worked to illustrate the nation's past. History would unfold there every morning, early, day by day, until we reached our time, then almost lean into the future, more desire than seen. You wanted, no, you assigned us to create. First, Pilgrim's Landing, done in shades of gray. Weather, weapons, clothes, the rock itself, all equally severe. Then, to befriend those somber strangers, others bravely red and brightly feathered, above words you said to print in colors. Welcome and homestead, sowing and harvest, hunting, hut and fish. In memory, the scripted scenes are clear. Arrows in flight pass safely overhead. Missing the settler, bringing down the deer, crops in the field rendered in tan and gold to feed the worker, farmer, soldier, priest. Nobody dies except the very old. Even the smiling turkey on its dish wears a corsage of carrots to the feast. What simple tales we learned early from you, who may well have believed them, though your own immigrant forebears found them less than true. Your name, like mine, rang with departures, roots severed, replanted here in fields of stone, less welcoming than crayons make them seem. Homelands are not acquired by pure dream. They may be stolen, and their crops denied to true owners, to slaves who tend their fruits, whose claims are honored after they have died, if ever, and whose names the years erase. How tempting now, Miss Conroy, to include, though late, their portraits in our wistful view, if only out of shame or gratitude. But let their absence say, we haven't run, only crept at a slow, uneven pace toward justice. Let it say, we're not yet done with your assignment, work we're pledged to do. And I've always remembered elementary school with a kind of tenderness, because I realized very vividly through every one of my five senses, sensed the difference between a democracy and a dictatorship like the one in which I was born. It was like music in the background, like violins in the background. But I also found out later, when I got behind the stories to the other stories that we don't tell in school, that not everything worked as easily, not everything was as well greased as it seemed. And I learned, I don't know what to call it, ultra history. So my thanks to Miss Conroy, who taught me so much, who made me dream so much that I still hope will come true, and who made us promise that we would make things come true that have not done so yet. And I like to think that our young ones, our grandchildren, great-grandchildren, will do that if we fail them. This is another American poem. It's called Seedlings, and the seedlings, of course, are the immigrants, people like me, people like so many of us, like the ancestors of some of you in the audience. This is Seedlings as I recall it. This is America, as I recall the wonder of it. Immigrants like me who fled their homes, wherever home might be, whatever drove them out of it, ran for your storied soil and did not find a wall, but a wide open door. Beyond the door, the classroom, full of noise, less unfamiliar as the girls and boys morphed into playmates with new words to teach, new foods, new games, and losses of their own. Old people trading smiles for lack of speech. They made me less alone. And what baggage we brought from distant places into your cities. Memory, the loss of neighborhood, shared language, friendly faces, the fragrance of night blooming cereus, the clang of church bells hailing the first light, and faint guitars at night. Transplanted to a soil not quite like ours, among your waves of grain, the nameless flowers, we sent down roots, reach for the sky, and grow among the native seedlings sown below, if opportunities in partial drops water the hybrid crops. We are the crops we pick, the work we do. If we move on, our labor pays the fare. We grow into the uniforms we wear in lab and stadium, operating room, on the cop's beat, and in the veteran's tomb. And so we become you. And who, America, are we today? Who will we be in years to come? In those we turn away, will we forget to see strangers who welcomed strangers? Or will we remember and forbid the door to close on those we used to be? Who will track down the children sent away far from a father's arms, a mother's voice? Who will unearth the photographs, the names, the homes of family where those refound may gather to rejoice in the sweet sound of children at their games? And here the map becomes even bigger. This is called panorama, because it takes in not only space, but also that other element in which we live, time. It takes in the history of early America, of this continent. When I say America, I mean the two-party continents that we live in. Panorama, bordered by space and time, cradled between two seas, gulfs, bays, 4 oceans, and 2 poles. A living gallery of every scene the earth conceives, inhabited by souls too restless for one landscape, who somewhere in Asia packed their tools, weapons, and tents, crossed the frozen strait eastward, and once there, spread south as far as they could, 2 continents. A spattering of dense green islands, then a shoreline like a sickle, and at last a spate of nations, kings, and tongues. Pale men who came to pillage stayed to tame the vast jungles, and the plains they learned to love, lie, steal, and murder for, possessed by force, more mastered by than ever mastered of. Ambition and possession set their course. America was place, but more than place, idea. A shifting vision of our kind, first fixed on wealth and power, lineage, race, but then at odds with an emerging mind in love with, was it reason or the law, or godly fervor, shaping what it can, or something wholly novel, fresh and raw, begotten by an offshoot, a new man. A difficult idea, prone to mistakes, America, but stubbornly pursued, built and rebuilt again each time it breaks by longings so insistently renewed that they've become a dream, partly fulfilled, always becoming, largely fantasy. A cloudy mission so intensely willed that hordes of strangers strive to make it be. How bring it to fruition? Let the strong temper their strength with justice. Heal, undo, set straight the record falsified too long. Tell every story whole and tell it true. Let those who come as we came be received. Let every debt be paid to earth and heaven. Forgiveness asked and earned from the aggrieved, and wrongs be righted first and then forgiven. And I'm going to close. I think this whole reading really has been a kind of gift to my beloved second country. And here is one that depends on my second country's first wonderful poet. This is Robert Frost, whom I think of as the king of poets. And it's based on a poem of his, but not exactly the same way. Some of you may have heard the phrase bout-rime, B-O-U-T-R-I-M-E, accent, and it means rhymed ending. And a bout-rime is a poem composed in the same form as somebody else's poem and using exactly the same end words, the same rhyme words. And sometimes it's an answer to the original, sometimes it's a commentary on it, sometimes it has no connection. In this case, I'm going to let you judge for yourselves what this poem is. Is it connected, disconnected? You think about it as you hear it. Acquainted, a bout-rime after a sonnet by Robert Frost. Acquainted? Oh, maybe I should read the original first. Yes, I think I will read the original. Do I have time? Anyone?
Yes, you do, Rhina. This
All
is
right,
your
thank you.
turn.
It's only a sonnet. It's just 14 lines. So let me read Frost first, and then I'll read you the good one. Acquainted with the night. I have been one acquainted with the night. I have walked out in rain and back in rain. I have outwalked the furthest city light. I have looked down the saddest city lane. I have passed by the watchman on his beat and dropped my eyes, unwilling to explain. I have stood still and stopped the sound of feet when far away an interrupted cry came over houses from another street, but not to call me back or say goodbye. And further still, at an unearthly height, one luminary clock against the sky proclaimed the time was neither wrong nor right. I have been one acquainted with the night. And here is my bout-rime of that magnificent poem. In my next life, I would like to be Robert Frost. Acquainted, a bout-rime after a sonnet by Robert Frost. Acquainted? No, much more, with more than night. Through more than earthly sun or snow or rain, rather made intimate by inner light. Those tire tracks that quaver down the lane, Those lamps whose lights create a visual beat, speak thoughts that thought alone cannot explain. They cancel solitude. If any feet leave traces on these bricks, if any cry dissolves the distance from another street, walker and speaker signal not goodbye, but find me at road's end or at the height where an embracing moon calls from the sky. We are, through image, song, the wounds we write, acquainted, and much more, both day and night. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Rhina. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Emily, this is
Yes, thank you
us
for.
now.
Oh, sorry. Thank you so much for such a wonderful reading. We've got some lovely comments coming in the chat, and now I just love to invite folks to put any questions that you have for Rhina or kudos right into the chat, and I will read them off. If anyone's feeling brave, you're also more than welcome to just come off mute and ask your question directly. We'd love to have a little bit of conversation. So I'll give it a minute for folks to put your questions into the chat or to take yourself off mute and ask that question.
And thank you again, Rhina. While we're waiting for a question for you, I
Don't
can
get
ask
it
you
out. I love to
a
converse.
simple one.
Could I give a question for Rhina?
Certainly, yes, thank you.
Hello, Rhina. Wonderful, wonderful as always.
Hi, Karen.
Karen, yes. I have from what you said at the beginning about poetry needs to be tended, a poem needs to be tended. It is not really a wildflower. It is something to be worked on and edited. I would like to ask, I'm working with wildflowers, the first and second graders. And those I consider absolute wildflowers, and they should be. How best? I remember you said once to me, meter. Make sure I teach meter. And is there anything else you can suggest?
Well, I think the meter is not only the fundamental thing about poetry that they must feel, not just understand the names of the feet and what the meters are called and so forth, but they must understand it physically in the body. So that dancing is really a wonderful way to learn meter. If you do drumming, if you use some instrument that makes that sound that is very crisp and very clear, and that may be soft or hard so that you can imitate the foot, ta-tum or tum-ta, ta-ta-tum, which is an anapest, or tum-ta-ta, dactyl. And don't bother teaching them the names don't matter. What they need to hear is the sound of English meter. And they know it because it's built into the body. Meter is part of what we are, part of what we know how to do, like walking or breathing in and out. So if they learn that, and you forget about rhyme, forget about images, forget about all of the other ingredients in a pot of poem, just do the meter first so that they can move to it. And once you've got them moving to it, it's a piece of cake. Because after that comes everything else.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. It's good. I'm glad you're here. Thanks, Karen.
Rita, I know you don't have access to the chat, but Denise says, thank you for a delightful reading and wise words about the cultivation of what is fine and meter. Thank you, Rhina, much to savor in your beautiful readings, lovely poems. Thank you for sharing these gifts.
Well, thank you, but let's have a conversation instead.
Yes. I think, Jean-Denis, did you have a question? Or I see Joyce putting your hand up. Anybody, just feel free to come on into that conversation.
Joyce, you are muted while speaking.
Rhina, I thought your acquainted was like a translation. And I know you've done quite a bit of translation, but did you think you were involved in the translation process as you wrote it, or
No.
was some other mystery going on?
No, it's just a bourrime. That's a French invention on the French to make up impossible things, right?
Yeah.
So they did that, and it teases at you. If you hear about it and you see some good samples, you have to try it. You have to try it. And what you do in order to try a thing like that, and you'll throw out the first 3 or 4 you do, it doesn't matter. Find a poem that you're really fond of and make it a formal poem, not the free verse, of course. It has to be rhymed and metered. You take that, and I'm going to teach you how to cheat. Don't tell anybody I did this. Take a piece of paper with lines on it. You know, the pad with the lines.
The ledger lines. Or,
At the end, write the rhymes in the original exactly where they should be, and skip the lines that the original skips at. Then you think about it a minute, read the original again several times. Do you want to answer it? Do you want to argue with it? Do you want to tell the original poet, no, that's not the way it works? Or what have you? Decide what your attitude toward the original poem is going to be. Or are you going to imitate it? Use that poem to say something that you yourself feel or believe. And then just start at the left and go to the right. And it works. It really does. And your first few will make you sick. But after that, they somehow begin to work. They get into your system, so that if you love the original poem, it will elicit some kind of reaction from you, and the reaction will finally be genuine. Can you guess? Can anyone out there give me an answer as to what the relationship is between the Frost poem and my bourrime, if there is a relationship?
well, it seemed very fond.
Okay.
Very fond of Frost.
Yes.
That.
But what about this stranger? What about this stranger who's walking the streets, listening to sounds from the other street over there?
Seemed much better related and more connected to everyone in the world. And Frost's poem seems much more about a kind of unnerved isolation and loneliness.
Bingo. I should have known you'd get it right away. Yes, exactly. What I'm arguing with Frost, which is a daring, nervy thing to do, but I do. And I'm telling him, no, we don't have to wander at night alone, because poetry helps us to communicate, even with strangers, even in the dark of night, because the person that my speaker is speaking to is the reader. I'm saying, well, it's right here in so many words. Walker and speaker signal not goodbye, but find me at road's end, or at the height where an embracing moon calls from the sky. We are, through image, song, the wounds we write, acquainted, and much more, both day and night. So I'm kind of inviting the reader to walk into my poem, alias My Wounds, and keep me company.
Yes, but Rhina, I don't think Robert Frost grew up in a place with soft breezes and the sound of faint guitars at night. Described. So I'm hoping in your next life, if you are Robert Frost, you have a lot more fun.
Well,
who are some other poets
I'll tell
whose work
the
you've
next time
used?
I hear. Excuse me?
Who are some other poets whose works you've used for this form?
I think I made one for Edna St. Vincent Millay, but I don't have it with me. Several. I've done about 3 or 4 since I learned the form. And it's a lot of fun to do, because you can either argue with or agree with, but at any rate, establish a contact with some poet whose work you love.
Okay, thank you.
Are you going to try it?
Yes.
Of course you are.
Rhina, I think you were forced to take a Shakespeare sonnet.
Oh, yes, that's right. I did a Shakespeare sonnet. Yes. And it appeared in print, but I've forgotten the name of the magazine. And that was the first time. I think you did that too, didn't you? Didn't you do that, Tony?
I think you showed me the book and it had 24 poets on the same Shakespeare sonnet.
Yes,
A,
yes.
a small chapbook that was
Yes,
wonderful,
little chapbook.
wonderfully,
That came out some years ago.
very, very varied poems.
A real needle in your elbow saying, do this, do this, do this. I love things that challenge you to do something you haven't done before.
When you taught me to do bourrée, it was because I was stuck. It's a wonderful way to get unstuck.
Yeah.
And secondly, you counseled me definitely to choose a poet and a poem in which the meter was appealing.
Yeah, right.
It's
You
like-
have to love the poem. You have to love the poem, otherwise it doesn't say. Sandra Thaxter says gourmet. Sandra, what are you trying to tell us?
I can't understand quite what the form is, what that you're trying to describe for this poem.
The form.
How do you spell it?
All right, you have a pencil?
I have it right here, yeah.
Okay, B-O-U-T, which means end, like le bout.
And yep.
The end of the street. And then the second word is remake, rhymed, R-I-M-E.
Oh, okay. Remake the end.
Yes, yeah.
Thank you.
I'm hoping that lots of
That's
people
lovely.
will with bourrées. Take one of mine and make fun of it.
Yeah, I will.
Anyone else? Did everybody go to sleep?
I have a question for you, Rhina.
Yeah, good to see you.
Good to see you. Thank you for this beautiful reading and congratulations.
Thank you.
My question has to do with form. You seem as adept at formal poetry as you do in with free verse, with sort of a looser poem. So my question is, what determines the shape of a poem for you? How do you think about making a poem and its ultimate form?
I don't think about it, because if I do, I stop it in its tracks. I found out, so this is serious now, if I carry a notebook around and write down ideas, that poem never comes back. And some people are so successful with notebooks. I really don't understand why I can't, but I can't, because once I start with just the idea or a line here and a line there, it's as if I had said to it, don't darken my door again. I have to just listen very quietly inside my head and be very polite. And the poem speaks to me. I hear it. It's like a voice in my head. And it's only after the poem has said what language it wants to be in, whether it wants to be free verse or formal, what kind of poem it wants to be, that I understand what's going on. Otherwise, I really don't know. I'm the last one to know. But it does speak. If you are very, very attentive and very quiet and don't push your own ideas on it, it will let you know what it wants. And finally, the beat, what I hear first is the beat, because I love to dance. I spent my youth dancing. And when I hear the beat and I say, aha, it wants to be in three syllable feet. Good, that's something I know now. But eventually the syllables start to take the place of the beats. And that's when I know what the poem wants to say. Before that, all I have is a kind of feeling, a kind of discomfort, as if I was itching somewhere. And I needed to scratch it. And that's how it happens. It's the only way I can write. By the way, I find free verse harder to write than formal. I find it quite a bit harder to learn because I have to make my own box. Whereas if I work with formal verse, it's as if the music were already playing, so I can dance. But free verse is like trying to dance with just a partner, but no music. which is very hard. So we're all different. We're all crazy in different ways, aren't we?
Thank you, Rhina. Thank you, Rhina. You know,
It's
I
really good to see you.
cannot let you go from your answer with this one. I have something for you here. I want you to speak to all these wonderful people who are here to witness you receiving your award and also to read to them. I want you to speak of the poems. Please speak about that.
About what?
The poems, the poetry that comes to you, and all you have to do to obey. There is not
Oh,
much to do.
well, that's what I've been leading up to. That is to obey. All I have to do is listen, and above all, not make it what I'm saying, but letting it be what it is saying. And sometimes what it's saying is a bit daring, and I wouldn't, if I were in my right mind, I wouldn't say it. But poetry does what it pleases, and it's not always in its right mind. So sometimes you reveal things in a poem that you would not in prose, that you would not say to a room full of strangers, for instance. But in a poem, even if it's being read to an audience you've never seen before, people you don't know, somehow it tells you it's safe to do this. This is okay. I can't explain it. I don't really understand the process, but I've been doing it since I was 4 years old. I didn't know how to write yet, and I would say to my grandmother, who was a poet, I would say to her, "Grandma, write down this," and she put it into a notebook for me. My grandmother never published anything, but she was good. She knew what she was doing. She published poems for weddings in the family and new babies and baptisms and things of that sort. It was family poetry, but she was very modest. She never thought that that she was good enough to publish, but I think she was wrong, and I wish she had published. Oh, somebody said Burimé as a working project. Yes, sure, by all means, give it to your students. Give it to your students.
I have a question here from Kathleen in the chat, who writes, Panorama, how did you settle on what would be in a poem about America? It is a large topic.
Oh, it's the largest topic around. I had written things about different places in the United States where I've been, because my husband and I did a lot of camping, with or without children, mostly with. We took them across the country 5 times in a tent or in a tent trailer. And it was wonderful. It was real discovery. It was discovery of wonderful, beautiful places. But you don't know what you're going to take away from that and back to your home with you until you're back there. And then you say, oh, I'll never forget crossing Indiana. There was a little boy with both his feet on the bottom rung of a fence, and he was holding on to the top. And when the train went by, he let go one hand and he went like this all the way until the train disappeared. I've never forgotten that little boy. I haven't written the poem, but I should, really. If it comes, I'll write it. But there are always details that you don't think you're noticing at the time, but you are noticing with something unconscious, with one of those people who is in yourself, but doesn't always speak to you. Somehow, if you're thinking poetry, they do speak to you. Those people are shy with you when you're in your intellect mode, but when you're in your poetry mode, they come right out. They come right out. So that's what I do. The poems are about experience. It's just experience. That's all it is. I have acquired a great many poems, ideas for poems, I mean, or feelings for poems rather, when I'm standing at the sink, seasoning chicken or making meatballs or what have you. It just comes when it feels like it. My husband used to say, when I walked around the house with my eyes on the ceiling like this, not even aware of where he would say, aha, I know what you're up to. And on some occasions, he would come to the room where I was sitting over my paper, thinking. And he would say, tell me, Rhina, Is it the case that we're going to have dinner in this house tonight? So there are costs involved, but they're worth it.
Thank you.
Oh, Kathleen Aponic, I remember when we were both in that Merrimack anthology.
Yes, that's right.
Yes,
Goes back a long time.
a
Right?
long time. How are you?
Yeah, fine, fine. It's good to see you.
Are you writing much?
Yes, trying, revising a lot. Just trying to
Oh, yeah.
revise.
That's a good thing. You know, it turns out that you get smarter as you get older. I take out poems that I thought were just fine when I wrote them, and I take them out now and I say, how could I have spoiled an otherwise decent poem by putting in this line? And,
Right.
and then I laugh and I say, well, I should have thought of it at the time. But you do, somehow you get better at it.
That's right. And you see the world a different way. You know.
Yeah, you do too. And you don't want to spell everything out and be direct. You want to give the reader something to do.
Right. Right.
Right. I'm having a lot of fun. Does anybody out there translate? Any translators out there? Oh, that's too bad. It's too bad because we need translations. We need translations very, very badly. We need to talk back and forth from different parts of the world.
I think translation isn't just a literary act, it's an ethical act.
You know,
it's a moral act.
Yes, you're right. Could you explain that a little bit?
We shouldn't be so isolated or self-important that we think all of the best work is written in English.
That's right.
And we owe a lot to writers in other languages, and we really, and translation is hard.
Yeah.
And in some ways impossible.
Quite impossible.
But we have to try. We really have to try.
But we do it. It's impossible, but we do it. It's one, that's another thing I love about poetry, how it can say yes and no at the same time. It's always, it speaks with forked tongue.
Uh-huh.
And translation is one of those cases, but I know that you're right. Can anybody imagine what our literature would be like without the myths, without Homer, without the Bible, without the legends from the East? All those things that we don't even think we think about, but they're in our subconscious. So, no, I think it's important. And I think it's important also in order to speak to the rest of the family. Oh, Sandra's been translating from German. Talk to us about German, Sandra.
Well, it's so precise always, and the sounds are very strong, not as lyrical as French, but they're powerful.
Yeah.
When you speak them.
Yeah. Well, all the Germanic languages are like that. When I came to this country, it was love at first hearing because it doesn't flow. It's totally different. It marches. It's a kind of masculine poetry. And yet it can be as tender and as sweet as any love poem in any language. Mm-hmm. It's wonderful. I love English. Have you published translations?
I tried. I haven't gotten any published yet.
Keep trying. We need published translations.
Rhina, this is Jean Dany again. Earlier, when you were talking about listening to the poem, I was hoping for when you were going to say, in listening to the poem, sometimes you also must listen for the language that the poem wants to come into.
Oh, yes.
That is a link also with translation. Sometimes you don't choose the language. You don't know yet. Is it English? Is it Spanish?
I
Is
don't
it
know.
French or
I
Creole?
don't
So
know.
you have to obey the language that the poem comes in.
You obey the poem and you say, yes, sir. Because if you don't, it goes away. They're very fussy. Yes, sometimes words in other languages come in too. I have languages that have to be used for special events, such as sewing. Both my mother and my mother-in-law were dressmakers. So sewing is done in Spanish. Cooking is done in either Spanish or Yiddish. And I know enough words in Yiddish to put together lunch. That kind of thing. You never know what is going to come out of those holes in your unconscious, those hiding places. In a way, it's exciting to know that there are places in you that you have never been in.
There is a question, Rhina, from Daniel asking you, what do you find a challenge of doing translation?
Well, the challenge is about 99% of what there is, because there is so much to lose. Translation, well, we were talking about it before. We said it, that it is impossible. You can't take a thought, not even a thought, but a feeling. You can't take a feeling out of the language in which it took place and expect to lift it out of in your hands like this and drop it into another language without losing a whole lot. The trick is, you have to know in advance that you're going to lose something. The trick is to lose as little as possible. And if you've lost only a few things, if you've lost a joke, if you've lost a couple of puns, if you've lost a word that doesn't even exist in the language into which you're working, you're lucky, you're fine, because loss is what there is. And you have to keep not only all of what is being said, but what is being sung and how it's being sung. The sound of the music of that language has to be somehow imitated, somehow made to recreate itself in that new language. Meredith says, did you find Richard Wilbur's poetry more difficult to translate than Frost's? No, not really. I call them equally difficult, but for different reasons. Different reasons because they have different body language. Did you know that poetry has body language? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does. It does. For instance, Frost doesn't speak to you like this. He speaks to you like this. He looks over a shoulder at you because he's not telling you the straight goods, He's always throwing in a joke or a little bit of mini malice, something that you didn't expect. For example, there's the one about going into the woods where he ends with, and I had been called, that is, if I had been called, and I had not. So he's talking about nature, but in the last two lines of that poem, he's telling you, well, nature calls you when it feels like it, but if it doesn't feel like it, it doesn't want you around. So, and that he does with body language that turns into words, into language, and he does it like nobody else. Now, the difficulties with Wilbur are something else, and that's the elegance and the grace. There is so much grace, so much smoothness that people have misread him and thought, oh, he doesn't really have much to say. He's all elegance, but no, he has things to say, and some of them are very painful and very hard, but he says them like those blackberries in the sky. The blackberries for Amelia. It's every poem of his has something in it that reminds you of how small you are. Not that he's trying to put you down, but he jumps from from the glass in the church window to the firmament. And then you say, oh, wow, which end of that spectrum am I at? He's a master of effects, a master of imagery. That's what he is. Every poet has his own difficulties, and I love being challenged by the difficulties. For instance, Edna St. Vincent Millay, who is so sexy and so daring, and she always looks, in her poems, I always see her with a martini in one hand and a cigarette in the other. And she's one of the first people that I imitated because it was so sophisticated. But of course, you learn a lot from imitation, only then you have to drop it. You have to drop it and not be anybody else. Very interesting. I encourage translation, not only because it's good for the language and good for the culture and good for the human race, but also because it's good for the poet, because it makes you crafty. It makes you sneaky and strong. Things come to you more quickly. The possibilities for rhymes, for instance, the possibilities for translatable jokes, for puns, everything comes more easily if you've done enough translation. So I recommend it because you'll gain from it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the truly wonderful conversation. I appreciate Rhina. I appreciate everyone here for this great exchange of ideas and for a really remarkable reading as well. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I would like to, we're just a couple minutes past 4. So we're going to start to conclude the event. But again, I hope that these conversations can continue and evolve for all of you in different ways. I know some of them are already ongoing for us at the Longfellow House here behind the scenes, just from folks who have been tuning into the reading. So thank you all. As we said at the beginning, this was the final event in the 2021 Virtual Summer Poetry Festival. I'd like to extend a great big thank you to the New England Poetry Club and the Friends of the Longfellow House, Washington's headquarters. We really hope to be back with you in person next summer. And we hope to see some of you in the fall as well for our upcoming fall lecture series, which will include both poets and historians. I would love to turn it over to Mary to conclude us for the afternoon. But thank you all once again and congratulations.
Thank you for all your work.
Thank you so much, Emily. And thank you, Rhina, for inviting us into these many different encounters, so rich and full of music. And thanks to all for joining us today. The next New England Poetry Club event is on August 31st. So it's coming up very soon. It's a workshop on the sonnet, and it will include Rhina and some other poets who are here today. So that's something we're all looking forward to. Also, we hope to see you at our Fall Poetry Fest on September 12th. And we just have a lot planned, many virtual events. So I welcome you to check out on our website. The calendar has our events that are coming up, and please, we hope to see you virtually anyway, at least. If
Mary,
not,
I want to thank you again, to thank you and the house, and of course the New England Poetry Club for this honor that you've done me, which my whole hometown will applaud and gossip about.
Right. I'll applaud you here as well. So
for you.
Thanks again. So take care, everyone, and hope to see you soon again.
Bye, Kathleen.
Bye, Rhina. Bye-bye.
It's good to see many old friends.
Okay.
It's been
Bye-bye, and thank you.
Bye-bye.
Ooh.